Emily froze. For a split second, the confident, charming woman everyone adored disappeared. Instead, I saw panic. Real panic. She forced a laugh. My purse? Seriously? Grace smiled politely. Only because you've seemed unusually anxious all evening. Emily crossed her arms. With all due respect, Mrs. Carter, I don't think anyone has the right to search my belongings. No, Grace replied calmly. They don't. Another pause. But refusing would naturally raise questions. Emily looked around the table, hoping someone would defend her. Mom immediately stepped in. This is getting ridiculous. Emily would never steal. Dad nodded. My younger daughter has always been honest. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because I'd heard those exact words my entire life. Whenever Emily broke something, I was blamed. Whenever money disappeared, Dad searched my room. Whenever teachers praised me, Mom reminded everyone that Emily was still the talented one. Nothing had changed. Except tonight. Someone else was watching. Grace slowly stood from her chair. There will be no searching. Emily let out a relieved breath. But, Grace continued, I would like everyone to empty their pockets and bags voluntarily. Daniel was the first. He emptied everything onto the table. Wallet. Phone. Keys. Nothing unusual. Without hesitation, I did the same. Lipstick. Notebook. Wallet. A packet of tissues. Nothing else. One by one, everyone followed. Finally, only Emily remained. She smiled nervously. I think this has gone far enough. Grace didn't argue. She simply waited. The silence became unbearable. Then, Emily opened her purse. She placed her wallet on the table. Then her phone. Lip gloss. Perfume. Car keys. A compact mirror. Nothing suspicious. Mom looked triumphant. There. She folded her arms. Happy now? Grace didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the purse itself. It seems unusually heavy. Emily's smile disappeared. It's designer leather. Grace nodded. I'm sure it is. She looked at the waiter. Would you mind handing Miss Emily's purse to me? Emily reacted instantly. No. The word came out far louder than she intended. Every head turned toward her. She realized her mistake immediately. I mean, I'd rather hold it myself. Too late. Grace's eyes narrowed. Daniel slowly looked at Emily. What are you hiding? Emily's face turned pale. I'm hiding nothing. Grace extended her hand. After several painfully long seconds, Emily handed over the purse. Grace didn't even open it. Instead, she gently tapped the bottom. Clink. The exact same metallic sound echoed through the room. Everyone heard it. Grace turned the purse upside down. Nothing fell out. She felt along the inside lining. Then paused. There seems to be. She pressed one corner. A false compartment. The manager stepped closer. I've seen bags like that before. He carefully unzipped a hidden seam. Something small slid onto the white tablecloth. Not another brooch. A tiny wireless device. No bigger than a matchbox. The restaurant manager stared. What is that? One of the security technicians, who had arrived to inspect the cameras, picked it up. His expression changed instantly. It's a signal jammer. The room fell completely silent. It temporarily blocks wireless camera transmissions. My heart stopped. Grace looked directly at Emily. So, She spoke softly. You knew the cameras would fail. Emily shook her head violently. I've never seen that before. The technician frowned. It doesn't belong to the restaurant. Daniel looked horrified. Emily. She burst into tears. I don't know how that got there. Then Grace asked the one question nobody expected. Who packed your purse today? Emily blinked. My, what? Did you pack it yourself? For the first time all night. Emily hesitated. I was running late. My mother helped. Every eye turned toward Mom. Her face lost all color. Dad stared at her. You packed Emily's purse? Mom opened and closed her mouth. It was just makeup. I don't know anything about. She couldn't finish. I suddenly remembered something. That afternoon, before we left the house, I'd walked into the kitchen unexpectedly. Mom and Emily had stopped talking the second they saw me. Mom had quickly zipped Emily's purse shut. At the time, I'd thought nothing of it. Now, every piece fit together. Emily wasn't the mastermind. She was the bait. Mom had orchestrated everything. Grace looked at my mother for several long seconds. Then she asked quietly. May I ask you something? Mom nodded weakly. Why did you hate Olivia so much? The question hit the room like an explosion. Nobody spoke. Not even Dad. Mom's eyes filled with tears. She whispered. You don't understand. Grace remained calm. Then help us understand. Mom looked at me. For the first time in years. She actually looked guilty. I never wanted. She stopped herself. Dad frowned. What are you talking about? Mom covered her face. I never wanted Olivia to outshine Emily. Silence. Emily looked up in shock. What? Mom couldn't stop crying now. Emily was always fragile. She needed attention. But Olivia. Everything came naturally to her. School. Music. People liked her. I was afraid. She looked at Emily. That one day even this family would choose Olivia instead. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. All those years. All those punishments. All those lies. All because my own mother couldn't stand watching me succeed. Daniel slowly reached for my hand. I barely felt it. Because Grace wasn't looking at my mother anymore. She was looking at my father. And you. She said quietly. Did you truly never notice? Dad's lips trembled. Then he whispered something I never thought I'd hear. I noticed. Everyone stared at him. He closed his eyes. Chose the easier daughter to disappoint. I felt something inside me break. Not because I was surprised. Because hearing him admit it hurt even more than living it. I stood up. No yelling. No tears. No dramatic speech. Just one sentence. I spent 26 years trying to earn a family's love. I looked at each of them. And tonight, I finally realized. I smiled sadly. I was applying for a job that was never available. I picked up my coat. Daniel stood beside me. Grace did too. As we walked toward the exit, the restaurant door suddenly opened. A police officer stepped inside. He looked directly at the manager. We've identified who disabled the security cameras. Then his eyes landed on my mother. We're going to need a statement. Discovered I never had one. The restaurant became so quiet that I could hear the grandfather clock in the lobby ticking. Every second felt louder than the last. The police officer walked over to the manager, exchanged a few words, then turned toward our table. I'm not here to arrest anyone, he said calmly. We just need statements regarding the security equipment. Mom's shoulders relaxed for a moment. Then the officer added, we already spoke to the technician who serviced the cameras earlier this week. Grace glanced at him. And? The officer looked down at his notes. The camera covering this private dining room wasn't hacked remotely. He paused. It was manually disabled. Everyone stared at him. It required someone with physical access to the hallway behind the dining room. The manager frowned. Only guests and staff passed through there tonight. The officer nodded. Correct. Then he looked at Emily. We also recovered footage from another hallway camera. Emily's face went completely white. There wasn't audio, he continued, but it clearly shows Miss Emily leaving the dining room approximately 12 minutes before the brooch was discovered. Emily immediately shook her head. I just went to the restroom. Yes. The officer nodded again. The restroom is to the left. He flipped another page. You walked to the right. Straight toward the service corridor. The room fell silent. Emily looked at Mom. Mom looked down. Dad whispered, Emily. She burst into tears. I didn't want any of this. I only wanted. She stopped herself. Grace's voice remained calm. What did you want? Emily looked at me. For the first time in my life. She wasn't pretending. She looked exhausted. Broken. I wanted one thing that was mine. I stared at her. What are you talking about? She laughed bitterly. You think Mom only hurt you? I frowned. Emily wiped away her tears. My entire life. I wasn't allowed to fail. If you got an A, I had to get an A+. If you learned piano, I had to win competitions. If you made one friend, I had to be the most popular girl in school. She looked at Mom. You never loved me. Mom froze. Emily continued, you loved the version of me you invented. The perfect daughter. The daughter who always had to beat Olivia. Her voice cracked. I was never allowed to just be Emily. Mom began crying. I did everything for you. No. Emily whispered. You did everything through me. Nobody spoke. Dad slowly sat down. He suddenly looked 20 years older. Daniel's mother broke the silence. This family has spent years treating love like a competition. She looked at my parents. You taught one daughter that she had to earn affection. Then she looked at Emily. And you taught the other that affection would disappear the moment she lost. Neither of them knew how to answer. The police officer quietly collected everyone's statements before leaving. No arrests. No dramatic handcuffs. Just consequences that would unfold later. When the doors finally closed behind him, Dad stood. He walked toward me. Slowly. Carefully. As though he knew one wrong word would make me disappear forever. I failed you. His voice barely rose above a whisper. There isn't a sentence long enough to explain how sorry I am. I waited. He continued. I kept telling myself I was keeping peace. But I wasn't. I was sacrificing one daughter so the rest of us could stay comfortable. Tears filled his eyes. I watched it happen. And I let it happen. Those words hurt more than every lie I'd ever heard. Because they were true. Mom reached for my hand. I stepped back. Not out of anger. Out of self-respect. You don't get to call me when you're lonely. I said quietly. You don't get to ask why I never visit. You don't get to pretend this started tonight. Mom sobbed. I can change. I nodded. I hope you do. But whether you become a better person, I don't have to be there to witness it. She broke down completely. Emily looked at me. I know you'll never forgive me. I thought about everything she'd done. Every rumor. Every lie. Every time she'd smiled while my life fell apart. Then I surprised even myself. I forgive you. Everyone looked at me. Emily blinked. What? I forgive you. She started crying harder. But. I shook my head. Forgiveness isn't an invitation. You are still not welcome in my life. I forgive you because I refuse to carry this anger any longer. Daniel quietly slipped his hand into mine. Grace smiled. Not because everything had been fixed. Because it hadn't. Some things never are. 3 months later. Daniel and I got married. It wasn't a huge wedding. No luxury ballroom. No 500-person guest list. Just the people who had proven they loved us without conditions. Grace walked me down the aisle. Not because she replaced my mother. But because, she said, every bride deserves someone who chooses her. Dad asked if he could attend. I said yes. Mom asked too. I said no. Some people thought I was cruel. Maybe. But boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. Emily sent me one final message a week after the wedding. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing a therapist instead of trying to win. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm finally trying to become someone who doesn't need to destroy other people to feel enough. I never replied. Not because I hated her. Because some stories don't need another chapter. Today, Daniel and I have a little girl. When she makes mistakes, we correct her. When she succeeds, we celebrate her. When she cries, we listen. She will never have to compete for our love. Because children shouldn't spend their lives wondering whether they're enough. I know what that feels like. And I promised myself that the cycle would end with me. So. Was I wrong for walking away from my family after they spent years choosing my sister over me? Sometimes the hardest thing you can do isn't exposing the people who hurt you. It's accepting that they may never become the family you deserved. And choosing peace anyway.